vanished without a trace. A settlement meant to be England's first permanent foothold in the New World became one of history's greatest enigmas. The Lost Colony of Roanoke remains a haunting question mark on the edge of America's earliest story. For over 4 centuries, historians, archaeologists, and storytellers have searched for answers. But the fate of more than 100 men, women, and children who disappeared from the small island off the coast of North Carolina continues to defy explanation. In this video, we'll take an unbiased, in-depth look at the mystery of the lost colony. We'll explore the events that led to its founding, the circumstances surrounding its disappearance, the theories that have emerged across generations, and the evidence, both archaeological and written, that brings us closer to understanding what really happened. No sensational claims, no wild speculation, just the historical record, the human context, and the enduring mystery that has fascinated scholars and the public alike. By the end of this journey, you'll know the story of Roanoke from its beginnings to its legacy, why it matters, and why it remains unsolved. The dream of a New England in the late 16th century. England was emerging from decades of political turmoil. Queen Elizabeth I, now firmly on the throne, sought to extend her nation's power overseas. Spain had grown rich from its colonies in the Americas, and England wanted a share of that wealth. But more than gold or glory, many in Elizabeth's circle saw colonization as a way to expand Protestant influence, challenge Catholic Spain, and secure England's place among the great empires. One of the key figures driving this vision was Sir Walter Raleigh, a courtier, explorer, and ambitious entrepreneur. Raleigh received a charter from the Queen in 1584, granting him permission to explore and settle lands not already claimed by a Christian monarch. In exchange, he would bear the costs and risks of the venture himself. Raleigh's goal was not only to establish a colony, but to create a base for privateering, a legal form of piracy against Spanish ships returning from the Caribbean. A settlement on the Atlantic coast could serve as a haven for English vessels and a stepping stone toward further expansion. The first voyages in April 1584, Raleigh sent an expedition across the Atlantic under the command of Philip Amadas and Arthur Barlow. After a 10-week voyage, they reached the outer banks of present-day North Carolina and anchored near Roanoke Island. The land was lush, the waters rich with fish, and the native peoples, particularly the Croatoan, led by Chief Manteo, appeared friendly and curious. The explorers returned to England with glowing reports. They brought 2 Native American emissaries, Manteo and one Cheese, who became living proof that a new world awaited across the ocean. Queen Elizabeth was impressed enough to name the region Virginia, in honor of her status as the Virgin Queen. Raleigh began assembling the resources for a full settlement, the first colony, 1585. The first attempt came the following year. In 1585, a group of about 100 men, led by Sir Richard Grenville and Ralph Lane, established a small outpost on Roanoke Island. It was intended as a military and exploratory mission rather than a permanent colony. The settlers soon discovered that the realities of the New World were harsher than expected. Supplies ran low, relations with local tribes grew strained, and leadership disputes flared. Lane's men relied heavily on the Algonquian-speaking peoples for food, and when tensions rose, the fragile peace broke. In a series of violent misunderstandings and retaliations, trust collapsed. When Sir Francis Drake stopped by the island in 1586 after a raid in the Caribbean, the weary colonists begged to return to England. Drake agreed, and the first colony was abandoned. When a supply ship arrived shortly afterward, it found the settlement deserted. Only a few signs of human activity remained. Still, the dream was not over. Raleigh resolved to try again, this time with families, farmers, and artisans, a true community rather than a military post. The second colony, 1587. The next expedition was led by John White, an artist and cartographer who had traveled with the first group. This new colony included about 115 settlers, among them White's own daughter, Eleanor Dare, and her husband, Ananias. The group landed on Roanoke Island in July 1587, intending to move on to the Chesapeake Bay area. But for reasons that remain unclear, perhaps navigational, perhaps due to the pilot's reluctance, they stayed on Roanoke. Almost immediately, they faced difficulties. The previous settlement's remains were overgrown, and supplies were limited. Relations with nearby tribes were tense, with some groups still angered by the previous colony's violence. Yet amidst these challenges, life went on. In August, Eleanor Dare gave birth to a daughter, Virginia, the first English child born in the New World. Within weeks, however, the settlers realized they needed help from England. John White sailed back across the Atlantic to gather supplies, intending to return within a few months. But the world he left behind was about to be consumed by war, the vanishing. When White departed Roanoke in 1587, he could not have foreseen the delays ahead. The following year, 1588, England braced for the Spanish Armada, Spain's attempt to invade and conquer. All ships, including those privately owned, were requisitioned for national defense. Raleigh's colonial ventures were forced to wait. It would be 3 years before John White could return to Roanoke. When he finally arrived in August 1590, what he found, or rather, didn't find, would become one of history's great mysteries. The settlement was silent. Houses had been dismantled, not destroyed. There were no bodies, no signs of violence. On a post near the entrance to the palisade, carved in capital letters, was a single word, Croatoan, nearby. Another tree bore the partial carving, Crow. White interpreted this as a message left by the colonists, indicating they had moved to Croatoan Island, modern-day Hatteras. But fierce storms prevented his crew from sailing there. Forced to turn back to England, White never saw his family again. The colonists were never found. The search for answers over the centuries that followed, explorers, settlers, and historians proposed countless theories. Some believed the colonists integrated peacefully with local tribes, merging into native communities. Others suspected they were killed by hostile groups or perished from starvation. Still others saw more exotic explanations: piracy, Spanish attack, or even supernatural causes. To understand what might have happened, we must look closely at the context of the time, the geography, the alliances and conflicts among native peoples, and the fragile logistics of early colonization, relations with the natives. Roanoke Island sat amid a complex network of indigenous nations. Chief among them were the Croatoan, friendly to the English, and the Secatan and Dasamonge Ponk, who had suffered under the first colony's aggression. When the second colony arrived, distrust already simmered that if the settlers moved inland in search of food or friendlier allies, they might have been absorbed by one of these groups. Some oral traditions among native peoples tell of fair-skinned or light-eyed individuals living among them generations later. Archaeologists have uncovered artifacts of English origin in native settlements, suggesting at least some contact continued, yet the evidence remains fragmentary enough to hint, not to confirm. Theories of assimilation. The assimilation theory is perhaps the most widely accepted today. It holds that the colonists, unable to sustain themselves, sought refuge with the Croatoan or other tribes. Over time, they would have intermarried, their descendants blending into the native population. European observers in later centuries recorded tribes in the Carolinas and Virginia who claimed partial English ancestry or displayed English-style tools and customs. While compelling, such reports came long after the fact and cannot be independently verified. The lost tribe. Theories, more speculative ideas, emerged over time. Some suggested the colony moved far inland, becoming one of the so-called lost tribes rumored in colonial folklore. Others believe the Spanish, still dominant to the south, discovered and destroyed the settlement to prevent English expansion. Spanish records, however, show no evidence of such an attack. And while rumors of massacres and secret rescues persisted, none were ever substantiated. Archaeological clues, modern archaeology has provided new insights. Excavations on Roanoke Island reveal signs of organized departure houses dismantled from materials, tools carefully removed. This suggests the settlers did not flee in panic, but relocated deliberately. On Hatteras Island, archaeologists have uncovered European artifacts, fragments of metal, tools, and a gun lock dating to the late 16th century mixed with native pottery. While not definitive, these finds align with the idea that at least some colonists joined the Croatan people. Another intriguing clue comes from a map drawn by John White himself. A later analysis revealed a patch concealing a symbol, possibly marking a secret fort site farther inland along the Albemarle Sound. Whether this represents the colony's final destination remains unknown. The Dare Stones in the 20th century. A new chapter in the Roanoke mystery unfolded with the discovery of the so-called Dare Stones. Beginning in 1937, a series of inscribed stones claimed to tell the fate of the colonists. Through messages allegedly carved by Eleanor Dare, they spoke of hardship, death, and eventual assimilation with friendly tribes. At first, the stones were hailed as a breakthrough, but subsequent discoveries, many bearing clumsy or modern English, cast serious doubt on their authenticity. Most scholars now consider them a hoax, though debate lingers over the possibility that the first stone, at least, might be genuine. The human element beyond the theories and artifacts lies a deeply human story. The Roanoke colonists were not soldiers or adventurers. They were families, farmers, artisans, and children. They crossed an ocean in search of opportunity and became victims of circumstance, isolati.